Hello and welcome to this video. In this video I'm going to cover the presentation that I did on Days of Knowledge 2025 for those of you who did not see it. I was talking about Integrate Business Central. This slide we don't care about because you already know who I am. What I'm going to cover is why integration matters, integration tools, if polling is the only option, webhooks, external business events, Dataverse, and on-premise data gateway. I'm going to have a lot of demos. So, first off, why integration matters. Well, back in the day, we were used to having everything inside Business Central because our ERP system could be changed in any way we wanted to. So we put everything inside, saying that everyone else external systems should just be part of our system instead of having all these external systems. But that also led to, like in this picture, saying that Business Central became fat and lazy, and everyone complained about how slow it was. So therefore we had to find another way. We had to start admitting that there was systems out there that were better, and then letting our Business Central do what it was best at. In the beginning, we did a lot of polling, but polling isn't a great option. Now, polling is when you keep on asking a system for updates, even though there might not be any updates, so you just have like a timer running, and then it keeps on asking if there's something new, and then you get the full data set every time, for example. Now, as I said, IT landscapes are getting more complicated, which means that we should start integrating instead of trying to put everything inside Business Central, and we should always pay to the best of breed. We should play to the strength of Business Central, however, because Business Central is very flexible. You can change a lot of it, and you can make it to any kind of system that you want. So it's not like I'm saying that you should not do things inside Business Central. I'm just saying don't put everything inside Business Central. And the flexibility also means that even large companies use Business Central as part of the IT landscapes, because you might have this large F&O or SAP running, but then they still have Business Central on the side because it's easier to change that and make it flexible, and then integrate that, and then make the changes inside Business Central and let that flow to the larger systems. Now, sometimes polling just is the only option, and that might be because that the systems are old or legacy and they don't support anything else. But if we are using polling, you should always use API pages for speed and consistency. Now, what I mean about speed and consistency is that in the consistency, you have the ability to create these endpoints, right? Where you have the API publish, API group, and API version. And then when it comes to a new version, you just change the version. And then everyone can still run on version 1 if they wanted to. And then you have a version 2 for the new feature, so you're not breaking anything. However, it's important to use API pages instead of using, for example, we have the ability to export or publish any page as a web service, but you should never do that, because doing that takes away this whole versioning thing. Also, we don't have the same control, because if Microsoft, for example, changes something on a page that you have published, that will also be published on the API page or the OData endpoint. You also don't have the same ability like we have here, where we have the data access intent, where we can set that to read only, which is important if we are only letting people take data from us, because if you do access intent to read only, it means that you're actually reading from a replica database and not the production database itself. So you're not making any performance issues on the production database. It's also a good idea to add last modified date to your API pages. Thereby, if someone is making polling, at least they can make a filter saying, I only want every record that has been updated since this date and time. And it's always important, of course, to use filters, so they only filter down to what they actually need, and select also to reduce how much data is actually pulled from Business Central. But what we're actually working towards in this presentation is please don't call us, we'll call you. Now, I'm not going to talk a lot about integration tools. I'm just going to mention the ones here, because these I'm going to mention throughout this video. We have Logic Apps and Power Automate. These are the low-code tools used to integrate with, for example, Business Central or anything else. The great thing about these is that they are easy to get started with. However, They also become very slow and can become very complicated because everything works on connectors. So you have to have a connector for every part of the system or every task that you want to do. On the other side, we have Asia functions. Asia functions are pro code, which means you control everything that happens in them. They have a much better performance than Logic Apps and Power Automate. However, on the downside, you have to be able to code. Then we have the service bus. And in this video, we're going to cover mostly the part of service bus that is the message queue. The idea behind the message queue is that we can send messages to the service bus, and then all the messages will be queued, and the external system can then at some point say, now I want to be able to pull these changes. So it could be that you have a system that is running, and I don't need real-time updates. I only need updates during the night. So instead of having my system being performance throttled by all these calls from Business Central, it might say, okay, now at night I'm ready. I want to pull everything that has changed in Business Central these 24 hours, and then it starts pulling these message services from the service bus. And last, we have Microsoft Fabric. I'm not going to really talk that much about Microsoft Fabric. It's just to say that it's there. It's Microsoft's data platform to work with data and visualizing it. The first thing we have is the webhooks. The idea behind this is don't call us repeatedly, we'll notify you. The way that the webhooks work is that every time something has been changed, we're sending a notification to some URL telling them now you can pull the record and get the changes. You can think of it like if you're in the living room, there's a husband or wife, and people keep on calling the husband, asking him, has he given birth yet? Hasn't he given birth yet? Hasn't he given birth yet? And the husband always says, no, we're still here. Nothing has happened yet. So you're putting stress on an already stressful situation by always asking and not getting the reply that you want. So instead of doing that, the husband could say, okay, I'm going to create this message group, so you can subscribe into this message group, and I will send a message out in the group saying when she has given birth, and then you can start calling me and I will tell you the details. That's the same with the webhooks. We're not going to get the full record, and you're only going to get it once something has been changed. So that means that once something has been changed, you're going to send it out into the notification, whatever system you're subscribing to, and then that system can say, okay, I will make a call getting that full record back from you. So this is a real-time notification. It happens as real-time as something can happen, because of course in the background everything is running on a job queue, and it's also running, of course you have to make the call. This has to make the call out the notification, and the notification system has to then pull the records. So there's always going to be some kind of delay here. However, it's easy to set up because any API page will actually be able to be a webhook. It only works on record changes. So if we are wanting it to trigger on any kind of business logic, that is not possible. And it requires an app registration. So the system that's calling back needs an app registration to be able to pull the records using our API. So we're going to have a short demo here, where we're going to look at the API page. It's just a very regular API page. The only thing that is important here is that you have an OData key field, and here I will always recommend using system ID, because that's the ID that's going to be sent on the notification, and that's the one we're going to use to pull the record back. Then we're going to look in Postman with this call to see what webhook supported resources are available to us. We're going to subscribe, and what is important is that once you subscribe to something, it has an expiration date. So in cloud, it would only be able to run in 3 days before we have to renew it. On-prem, you can set this to something else if you want. So just a little visualization here. We're going to use Postman to subscribe to a webhook notification URL. So we're going to call Business Central. Business Central is then going to send a validation token to this URL that we're saying we want to be notified. Now the important thing is that the endpoint is not allowed to be secure. You're not allowed to have any OAuth or any other kind of security on it. It has to be an open endpoint. Now, when Business Central sends this validation code, this in this case is going to be a logic app. Normally, you can also use, of course, Asia function and anything else. I'm also going to show you how an Asia function could look. It's a little bit more similar than the logic app. However, logic app, of course, is a little bit more visual. Anyway, we sent in the validation token to logic app. The logic app will then respond with that validation token back to Business Central. And once Business Central gets that validation token back, Business Central is going to say, okay, you have said you want to be subscribed to my resources here, so everything is good to go. Now, when something is notified, when you change something in Business Central, it will send a notification URL, a notification payload to your notification URL, which this type again is a logic app, and the logic app will use that resource URL to pull that record from Business Central. And as I said, webhooks, they do expire, so you need some kind of flow to keep on renewing it. So in this, I'm just saying I have a logic app running maybe every 24 hours, or you could also set it, of course, every 3 days if you want. I like to make it every 24 hours because then if something fails, at least I have some time to actually find out what is going wrong, why can't I renew it, so I don't just stand there with a system that is not actually getting any notifications. But anyway, it just sends a renew request to Business Central. Okay, so let's just look a little demo here. So the first thing that we're going to look at is just the API page. So as I said, it's very straightforward. There's nothing special about this API page. I have a couple of fields that is based on a table that I've created called doc sessions. The important thing is, like I said, that you have your OData key field here for the system ID. So if I go to my Postman, I can check here. This is just one URL to see what is the resources that are supported for webhooks. I have my tenant ID and my company ID, and then I call this endpoint. Let's call it. And I get a list of all APIs. So if I search here, I can see my doc sessions, which is of course the API page that I have published myself as a custom page. I can then use this endpoint to see if I already have any subscriptions. This is to see if I have any subscription on the default Microsoft endpoints. So I press here. I can see I don't have anything. The same for custom. The difference with the custom is that I have my API publisher and my API group. Otherwise it's the same. Again, I don't have anything. Now if I want to subscribe, I will call this URL like the ones we already saw, which is a subscription. And then I need to say the notification URL. Here I have a logic app and what resource I want to be able to hook into. And here is the doc sessions API. And then we have the client state. The client state is not needed. It's a kind of security saying that if I'm sending a client state web shop to my notification URL, it's going to be part of the payload. And then I can always say, okay, this is a web shop client state. So I actually want to be able to handle this. Or if it's something other than web shop, then it's not for me. Then just let's leave it. Anyway, so let's subscribe here. And I'll get back saying everything has gone well. And as I said, here's the expiration date. It's in 3 days. Now, if I check my custom, I can see now I actually have a subscription. So if I go to my Asia functions, to my Asia, and go to webhooks, I have gotten a new one here. And what it says is it's gotten a request where it has a lot of different information, but we don't really care about. What we do care about here is that we got a validation token. So I have a check saying if I got a validation token, then respond with that validation token. And that's why I'm now subscribed. If I did not get a validation token, then it will go down here and then we'll do the rest of the flow. So if I go to my Business Central and I go to my doc session list here, and I want to edit it, and I want to say this is actually at 10 o'clock. It's going to save, and I go back to my run history, and then at some point, and now as you can see I have gotten a new run over here. So if I press it and see what happened, it's going to say, yeah, I got a receive. However, I don't have a validation token, so this has failed. But then that means that I actually got a payload. And if I look at what payload that I got, I've gotten this resource URL which I can then call and get that exact record, because as you can see, this is a system ID that I've gotten. Now in this example, I'm not doing anything with it, but of course, this is where I would then call back to Business Central to get that record. Now, you can see this is a little complicated, the flow, because I have to handle it this way. So just to say, if we were using an Azure function instead, all we had to do is actually this part here. Again, all it's doing is checking if there's validation token. If there is, then return it. And then we can just, if it's not there, then we can code whatever we want. So it's much simpler than the flow for the logic app. Anyway, as you can see in my, as you saw in my API page here, I had the name, description, and start, which then said, oh, that's the only things that I actually care about. The only problem is that if I changed something on another field that is not one of those, for example here, if I wanted to change something in my dummy field, that would also trigger the webhook, which is kind of annoying, right? But that's how webhooks work. They work on any change on the record, no matter if it's important for you or not. Now let's see, if we want to renew our webhook, we have this ability where we have our gain subscription, and then we have to provide it with a subscriber, the ID for the subscription, which we get from our subscription ID here. So we copy that and place it here. The important thing is to remember here is if you also need to have this if match. Now I'm using if match star, which means that I'm saying if anything matches, that's fine. But in real time, you actually have to be able to use the if it matches this OData E tag. So that's what you had to put in here instead. But anyway, I'm just using the star. So if I want to renew it, it says now it's been renewed. Of course, there isn't much to see because normally okay, now it's going to be a day later. Now it's just a couple of minutes later that it's actually been before it expires. If I want to delete it, I call the same endpoint just with a delete. And again, here, and it's gone. So if I go back to here and say, do I have anything subscribed to me? No, I don't. So that is actually how webhooks work. So what have we just saw? Well, we saw that we could subscribe to any API page that we wanted to. We will get notified on record changes. That means any change on the record, not only just changes to the fields that you care about, so anything. And it expires, so we have to renew it. If we are having a larger scale, then we should consider using a service bus to queue notifications. So instead of, because as I said, on any change on the record, you're going to be notified of. It means that if you're having something that's been changed a lot, you get a lot of notifications with different fields, and you might not care about them. You just want the full record with all the changes once they're all done. So that's where you might have to use a service bus. So instead of having real-time notifications, you're saying you're pulling every 10 minutes or so, or 1 hour or whatever, and then the service bus will collect all these notifications, and then you'll have something that says, okay, I'm going to only get a list of all the unique system IDs that I've been notified about, and then make a call only on those unique ones, so only make one call back to Business Central. So as you can see here, this is how it would work. Business Central notifies an Azure function. The Azure function sends that resource URL to a service bus. Then we have another Azure function running on some kind of timer that will pass all the messages from the service bus and create this distinct list, and then get the updated records and then send those to the external system. So the pros here is that you need to make a callback to retrieve data, which means that you have the security that you still need an app registration, and that app registration is of course controlled by us in Business Central, what permissions it's allowed to do, what it can do. The cons is it will be triggered on any record change, so even, as I said, fields that we don't care about, it's still going to be notified. We should use it when you need real-time notifications and on records that don't change a lot. So of course, if the record doesn't change often, then it's fine just to get notified every time it happens. And then when other options are better, if you only need limited data on a record that are changed often, this might not be the way to go. Then it's better to maybe use external business events, which we're going to get to next, where we only actually get notified with that specific data that I care about and not a lot of other fluff. So the external business events, they use the don't call us, we'll send it. So they work pretty much like any other events in Business Central. The only difference is, of course, that these can be subscribed to from outside our Business Central, so the external events. They can be triggered on business logic, just like regular events. You can create custom payloads. Now, as I'm saying here, custom payloads, we still have the Microsoft standard payload that we're going to have wrapped, but inside the Microsoft we have these custom payloads with the fields that we want to notify and so on. We'll get to that, but custom payloads is part of the Microsoft standard payload that they're sending. It does not require an app registration. Now, it requires an app registration to actually set it up first time, but once it has been set up, app registration is no longer needed because Business Central is making the call out with the data, which is also it means that we should not send any sensitive data because we have to call an unsecure endpoint. We cannot call a secure endpoint. So keep that in mind when using it. And then it requires custom code. So we have to make some kind of code change inside Business Central for these to work. So we're going to have a short demo. We're going to create a new event category. We don't have to create a new event category. We could just use one of the standard ones, but it's nice to make your own so it's easier to filter on. We're going to create the business event. As you can see here, it's quite like we know them. We have a name, a description, and we also have a longer description of how the name of the trigger, the description of the trigger, and so on. And then down here, we also have what payload we're going to send. We're going to see this in Business Central just in a moment. Then we're going to raise the event. On this one, I'm going to bring on an after validate event on a field. And then we're going to subscribe to that event. Now, to subscribe to an event is a little bit more complicated than it is for subscribing to a webhook. We need the company name and the company ID. We need the event name, and then we need the app ID. So that's the ID of where this event is actually written. So when we're creating a custom extension, that will be our app ID that we have to put in here. And then again, we have a notification URL. Who am I going to send this payload to? And the client state. So in our AL code, we'll start with having this event category where I'm extending it. I'm just extending it with a session, so nothing special here. And then a code unit where I'll actually create my event. So as you can see, the text, so I'll have a name, display name, description, category. And that's all it does. Then here I'm saying I want this to be called with these parameters. Now this is actually going to be the payload that we're going to create. So my payload is going to consist of a session ID and a new start time. And then down here, I just have a normal event subscriber where I subscribe on after validate on the start field on my session table. And I'm then saying once this has been validated, just call this function up here. And that's it. Now this is actually set up. So to see the external business events, we have a get. Now, unlike the webhooks, we don't have one to see all the available resources. Not at the moment anyway, and that's because this is still in preview. Microsoft is still working on it. Anyway, we can see what has subscribed to us. So at the moment, I don't have anything subscribed to me. If I want to subscribe, I create this call. Like I said, we have the app ID, which is the most important or the more difficult thing to find, and of course the event name and the notification URL. So as you can see, this is a little, you need to know something about Business Central before you can actually make these subscriptions. So it might be that this is not something that the external partners are going to do. This is something that we are going to do as developers and set this up. So we're going to ask the external partners to say, do you have a URL I need to notify? Okay, then let me set this up for you, and then I will notify it. Anyway, so like that, it has been subscribed. And if I then go to my here and change one of these again, let's just say that this was at 9 o'clock. It's been saved. I go to my Asia. I have my external business events over here. I got a new notification. So what did I get? As I said, I have all this is always going to come, all this information, but this is actually the payload, right? So I have the session ID and I have my new start date, which were the two fields I said I wanted to notify on. Now I recommend that you always get this this ID as part of your payload, because it might be instead of sending sensitive data, then you always send the system ID, and then they can say, okay, these have been changed. If you want the full record, you can use the system ID to call back to the API and then get the full record of what has been changed. Now the thing about our business events is also, if I try to go here, I can actually see them inside my Business Central. So I can see someone has actually subscribed to me on this event, and in which company, and who's going to be notified. Now I can't do anything with it, so I can't delete it from here, but I can see someone has already subscribed to me. And I can also see what notifications has been sent to this specific subscription. So if I want to delete this again, because this will never expire, so this is something that we have to keep in mind, as once you create this subscription, it will run forever. So you have to trust the people that you are letting subscribe. We take our ID like we did before. And we have a delete here where we then pass our ID saying, okay, I want to delete it. And it's gone. So if I call this now, it should be empty again. Yeah. Again, you need this if match as part of your header. So what we just saw, we can create custom triggers for business event to trigger. They let us send custom payloads. They do not expire, unlike webhooks. So once they're set up, they'll run forever unless you manually go in and make a delete request against it. And no authentication once it's set up. So it's not secure. So if you want to use this, I really do suggest that you use some kind of Azure middleware. So instead of notifying a third-party system directly, we have something in Azure, our own, that is going to be notified, and then that can send it to the third-party system. Now, this is not only for security, it's also that the third-party system might not have any unsecure endpoints that you can actually notify. Like Business Central doesn't have any way of getting a unsecure post request against it, because you always need OAuth. Many systems are the same way. So you're going to have some kind of middleware for this to work. So the pros are it can be triggered on business logic. The cons are it has no built-in security, except for, of course, when you subscribe the first time, you need security to actually set up the subscription, but once it's set up, nothing else is needed. You should use it when you know that the endpoints that they're calling are secure, so there are something inside that you trust inside something like Asia or whatever. And when you need information to be sent on business logic, this is of course the way to go, because it can be triggered. So for example, if something is doing the posting routine, then you can trigger it directly there, saying that now this has been posted, and sent to the web shop saying that this you can now send this item, this shipment. When other options are better, if you're integrating directly with a third-party system, so if you don't have any ability to make any middleware, this is not the way to go. First of all, the third party might not be able to handle it, and second of all, it's unsecure. And also, if you're sending sensitive data, this is not the way to go. Unless, of course, you're sending just a system ID and then letting someone else pull data directly from Business Central. So they actually work kind of like a webhook. Only the thing is that it only triggered on what you want it to be triggered on. So now we looked at how we can do a lot of these sending data outside to Business Central, right? So using straight out HTTP calls. But then we also have the Dataverse. So the idea behind Dataverse is that we have virtual tables and sync tables. Dataverse is the Microsoft platform for all data. So any Microsoft tools is going to have some kind of integration in Dataverse. So instead of trying to make all these fancy integrations, then let's try to put things inside Dataverse so systems can access it through there. We have two ways of doing this. We have virtual tables and data sync. Virtual tables provide real-time data, and you should use them when data volume is large and they have direct access to the data. The great thing about virtual tables is that data is still owned by Business Central, because what all it does is actually it takes API pages and then it creates a proxy table inside Dataverse that lets you connect directly to your data in Business Central. So Business Central still owns all the data. And data sync is if you need the data to be able to access it offline, which means that if Business Central dies for some reason, is offline, then virtual tables will no longer work. However, data sync will work because you've copied all the data to Dataverse. That also means, of course, unlike virtual tables where you don't have to pay for any extra storage, in data sync you will have to pay for the storage that you're using in Dataverse. If you need to enhance data, then data sync is the way to go. That means that you don't need, for example, let's say I have an item, you can actually take some of the fields of this item and copy to a table in Dataverse called whatever, and only copy some of the fields, and then other system could actually maintain other of the fields, and then you can have one table that's actually based on data from multiple different systems. And on top of that, then you have the speed, because when it's inside Dataverse, then you can access the data directly from Dataverse, so you don't have to go through Business Central. So the idea is, don't call us, call Dataverse. So we're going to have a demo where we're going to talk about the virtual tables. We're going to use the assisted setup to set up these virtual tables, also set up the data sync. All API pages can be found as virtual tables in Dataverse. They support read and write. Now for data sync, it requires a little bit more setup. We need this AL proxy table. It's a CDS type table. Now they have created a tool that we can run from PowerShell to actually create these tables for you, mapped directly to a Dataverse table. And then they're going to link some tables and fields in Business Central. Let's go to assisted setup. down here, we have connect different systems, set up connection Dataverse. Now it tells me I already have one. Do you want to run it again? So yeah, let's just run it again. Here we have the ability to say if we wanted to enable data synchronization over to tables. I'm going to leave both of them. Of course, you should only use the one that you need in your case. We have these terms and conditions. And here it has already saying, okay, I have a Power Platform for this user. Let's use that one. Then we need to sign in with an administrator account that has administrator on the Power Platform. So let's just sign in here. And now it's green saying, yeah, an administrator has signed in. Let's press next. Here we have the ability of what kind of connection we're going to create. Now just do like Microsoft say and leave it on team. I don't want to synchronize data once I'm done, but of course if you do, you should put this on. Out of the box, Microsoft has some standard tables that will then start synchronizing to Dataverse. These are the tables used for the CRM integration. Anyway, I'm going to say no. And here it's saying, okay, everything is ready to set up virtual tables. Now mine is saying it's already installed. The first time around it's not going to say that. So if you press this one, it's going to take you to an AppSource app. Where I then can press get now. And it should take us to our data platform. To our Power Platform here. Where we have the ability to change what environment I want us to go on. And so on. Anyway, mine is already set up, so I'm not going to do that. So I just get out of that one, go back to as setup, and press finish. And then it's set up. So if I go to my makepowerapps.com or my Dataverse, I go to tables. I go to all. And I search for Business Central available tables. I have this one where I can actually see all the tables that are now available for me to virtualize based on my API endpoints. And if I press additional rows, I can then see all the different APIs that are available for me. And as you can see, I already have set up my doc session. So once I set this, then it's visible and it will create a virtual table for me. So if I go back to my tables, I go to all, and I search for doc. I have this one called doc session. And everything is here. And this is real-time data, right? Okay, so that was the virtual tables. The data sync. So the first thing to create data sync, you create a new table. Now I already have a table in here called doc25, which as you can see is empty. Now if I go to properties, advanced, and I get this logical name because I need that. Then in PowerShell, first off, you have a tool on your extensions when you install the AL extension in Visual Studio Code. Now your version might be different than mine, so you just have to find the version that you have installed and then find this alt PNG. Once you then cd to that folder, you should run this command. So the first off is you say you have this private, of course, sorry. You have the path to your project, the path to your AL packages, the service URL, which is Dataverse or Power Platform, a client ID. Then you have which URL to redirect. You don't need this, so I'll just leave it as localhost. And then down here we have which entry. So if I say this is actually the entry, so it's going to look at my Dataverse now, saying, okay, do I have anything called this? Then which object I wanted to create, and what kind of table type. So this is just the object ID that my table, because it's going to create a new AL file inside Business Central, inside my AL package that I need. So let's just try to run this. And then I'm going to authenticate with my admin account on the Power Platform. Now I don't know my password because it's something auto-generated here. Let's just paste that in there. And then my authenticator app. So now it's calling my Dataverse. And it's done. It says as one file has been written. So if I go back to my AL code here, I've gotten this new AL file. So the important thing is it is table type CDS. You can see the external name that it's going to be using. And then it has created this proxy table for me. So nothing really special. You don't need to use that tool. You can also just create this manually if you want in the AL. Anyway, let's try to publish this. Okay, now it's been published. So let's go to our Dataverse connection setup. We go to integration table mappings. Now these are the ones I already have, so let's create a new one. There's a new table mapping. Give it a name. Let's call it Doc 2025. So which table do I want to be able to send? Let's just say item. So the integration table that I'm going to integrate with. So these are all the ones, as you can see, this is my new one, right? My Doc25 CDS. Let's just choose these. Now, here you have the ability to say what kind of direction you want to sync. Now, I will never say you should use bidirectional, because even though Microsoft says that you can do it, it's not a good idea, because you really should choose which system is your master data system, because even though this might work in 90% of the times, when it does not work, you're going to have to handle some kind of conflicts, which is really annoying, right? So let's just say that I want to integrate to my integration tables. Then I have to set up which field I want to map. So let's just say I want the item no to my notes field. Again, not bidirectional. And then let's say I have the description, which I want to my description field. And not bidirectional. And next. And finish. So now I have this one down here. So let's synchronize. Run full synchronization. And let's see. It has inserted 63 records. So if I go back here and refresh, you can see all my items has been set here, all the rows. So yeah. So how it actually works is that Virtual tables have this API pages, so Dataverse is actually just calling the API pages, right? And then the API pages are calling Business Central. The data sync is a little more complicated. You create a table in Dataverse, then you use this PowerShell command to create our table proxy, which we then deploy to Business Central, where we then map these tables, and then those are pushed to Dataverse. So what we just saw, the assisted setup is easy for us to get it up and running. Virtual tables are based on API pages. Data sync requires setup in Business Central. Security is handled in the background. So even though behind the scenes it's actually creating an app registration and everything, we don't really care because Microsoft is handling that for us. So we don't have to worry about an app registration that is going to expire and so on. Now, virtual tables can be used in Power Apps, but they cannot be used in Fabric. So there are some limitations to these virtual tables, and they're still very new. So there are a lot of things you can't do in virtual tables. Data table sync can be used in both because data is actually copied to Dataverse, which means that Fabric can also use it using the Fabric connector. So the pro is let Dataverse be your middleware. So instead of having to create some kind of Azure middleware, then put everything inside Dataverse and then let people call Dataverse instead. Because it's easy to integrate from Dataverse. Dataverse is Microsoft's big platform for data, so they're always going to be able to be some kind of connection to it. Now, on the con side is it might require some other expertise that we are used to, because this might not be a Business Central developer or consultant that can know anything about the Power Platform, so you might need some other people to help you. So when to use? Well, when you want to make data available in real time to other Microsoft products, then it's a good thing to use inside Dataverse, because most, if not all, Microsoft products have some kind of connection to Dataverse. All the data is going to be stored in one platform, which means that governance is controlled from that platform. So instead of having to control some security in Business Central, some security in Dataverse, some security in whatever other system, everything is controlled inside the Power Platform's governance. Now, when to use other options? Well, if the product that you're using does not have a connection to Dataverse, does not have a connector, has no easy way of doing so, then Dataverse might not be right for you. Then you might as well just do it in Azure, where you have a little bit more control, because, of course, Dataverse is a closed platform from Microsoft, so you can't change that much on it, like if it was your own coding behind the scenes. Okay, so now we talked about when everything is great, everything is in cloud, and everything works as it should. However, we do have some times where we have legacy systems, right, that run on-premise. So we have to be able to call those resources in some way, and that's where we have the on-premise data gateway. It's a secure way to communicate with on-premise systems and the cloud systems. You can get access to on-premise data without opening any firewalls. And that's because everything is actually being pushed from the system. Nothing is being pulled. So everything is going through the HTTP endpoints. And it's the only way that we can integrate with legacy systems on-premise services. So we're going to have a short demo here, where we're going to connect our gateway to Azure. Now, as you can see, when you install it, everything is going to be running for Fabric, and it's going to be running for Power Apps and Power Automate without any problems. And that's because when you install the data gateway, you're going to have to use an Office 365 login, and it's then going to use that user's permissions to create these connections behind the scenes. But that's not how it works for Azure. Then you actually have to create an Azure resource. But we're going to see that. We're then going to connect our logic app to the data gateway, and we're going to connect our SQL Server so we can actually see how we can pull data directly from an on-premise SQL Server to an endpoint in Azure. And we're also going to make some trigger on files. Now, for this scenario, I have created a virtual machine where I have a SQL Server running inside, and I also, of course, have the file share. Now, as you can see, I have a table here where I have these 3 rows, session 1, session 2, session 3. And if I try to call my logic app, which uses the connector on Azure, I have session 1, session 2, session 3 getting it out in SQL. So if I try to go to my logic app and see how it's actually set up, it's quite straightforward. If I go here to edit, it just uses of course, gets a HTTP request, and then it uses the standard SQL connector. The thing that is of course important here is that I have created in here my connection to a data gateway. As you can see, if I had up here saying I want to use Windows authentication, I can then say which subscription and then which gateway I want to connect to. So nothing magical there. The same thing is for my my file gateway. So when I change something in my files, it will use the same, and it will say, okay, something has been changed. My hello text in my folder test has been changed, and then it will get the new content. So again, nothing very magical going on here. And behind the scenes, this one is also using a connection like the other one where I connect to my data gateway. So everything is actually working on the connectors as you would normally do on a logic app. The only thing is that the connection string is to a data gateway, which then proxies and calls directly to the on-premise service. Now, the important thing here is to remember that you might think this is a trigger based, but it's not. It's actually running on a timer behind the scenes. So even though you think that now something has been changed, I want to be notified directly, that's not the case. It runs on a timer. By default, every 10 minutes. Of course, you can set that down to 1 minute, but then we are back to the point, right, where we started all the way in the beginning about polling. So we actually always polling the system to see if something has changed. But that's the way that things work, and we can't really change that. So what we just saw, so it's easy to set up. You just download the client from Microsoft, and then you go through the installation process saying next, and then it's set up and running, especially if it's the Power Platform. If it's on Azure, you then just need to create this Azure resource by pressing on the data gateway and then creating the link. You can access on-premise resources through your data gateway. And beyond the scope, you can also access custom connections. That means that if you have some system running on-premise that does not have out-of-the-box SQL Server or something you can connect to, you can also create these custom connectors. So it could be like you have a legacy NAV running on a server that has some SOAP endpoints, but the IT department does not want to open these endpoints to the world. Then you can make a custom connector from your data gateway that connects to these SOAP endpoints, and then through the data gateway, you can then access these SOAP endpoints by thereby accessing the legacy system without having to open any firewalls. So it's easy to set up, and there's no need to open any firewalls because everything runs on the 80 port. However, on the downside, it has a max of 2 megabytes. So if the files that you're trying to read are larger than 2 megabytes, this will not work for you. It has a limitation there. It does not have any support for Azure functions, so only Logic Apps and Power Automate can connect to this data gateway. So if you want to do something with Azure functions, you will first have to connect with the Logic App and then let the Logic App call the Azure function with the payload and then do whatever logic you want. And it runs on a timer, not on a trigger, as I said. So if you want to use it, you have to use it when you're integrating with legacy systems, when data sizes are small, or if you need to query an on-premise database, then this is a great option for you. When not to use it, if you have to process large amounts of data. Now this is both because, first of all, like I said, 2 megabytes is your limit, and second of all, you're limited to using Logic Apps. So if they are larger files, then it's a better idea maybe to do some kind of logic that uploads the file to a blob storage, and then let an Azure function take it from there. And unlike the Logic Apps, the Azure function is actually trigger based, so that will happen in real time. So again, if it really needs to be real time, these data gateways might not be for you. Well, anyway, that was just like a very fast run through of what I was covering on Data Knowledge 2025. All of these topics also have different blog posts and videos on my channel and on my blog. So of course, feel free to read those and go through them. And as always, just reach out if you have any questions for me. Well, until then, stay safe and thank you for watching. Goodbye.